This isn't preparation. I'm going to explain all this first and then demonstrate what I use to polish a cast aluminum cylinder head. I'll try to give you my 21 years of polishing experience in less than an hour of video, but only if you want it. I'm going to give you some important concepts for your philosophization while you absorb this. Number one, how shiny is shiny? This definition is totally subjective. Number two, everything has a hardness, from the material that you're polishing to the wheel that you're using and the compounds you select. Number three, it's not the cost or the brand of the supplies that you're using. Your process is what's going to determine the outcome. I've got a big old spread of examples, 3 different brands here. All the stuff on the right is from Eastwood. The NK polishing kit, 3-inch wheels with a 1/4-inch mandrel and the 1/8-inch mandrel bag of 50 bobs and rotary tool assortment, that came from Amazon. Everything you see in front of the cylinder head is from Harbor Freight, and half the stuff over here to the left is too. Anyway, this process is dirty and dangerous. You need to protect yourself from heat, abrasion, dust, flying debris, and flying hunks of metal that the polishing wheel can rip right out of your hands and hit you in the face with. Or launch it off your workbench at something else valuable, so be careful. Welding gloves, goggles, respirators, face shields, coveralls and such, you really do need these. I prefer welding gloves because they're the best compromise for protection from a burning hot part and your ability to hold on to it. Even the cheapest leather pair's inner lining is going to make them more comfortable ones to work with overall and deal with perspiration better. You're going to ruin these gloves for any future welding you wish to do, so if you want to use this as an excuse to buy a really nice pair with use your busted old cheap ones and then use those for polishing, this is it. All the safety gear except for the glasses came from Harbor Freight. Use a respirator that seals really well, enough to protect you from the dust you're going to create. Bring your own sleeves with a head covering if you happen to, want to do this. You really need to cover up. Even if you do cover, it's still going to get in your eyes, ears, nose, everywhere. You're still going to taste it. You'll get caked in residues that aren't difficult to wash off with soap and water, but it can take a lot of time, elbow grease, and soap to remove that. You leave a ring around your tub if you don't. You'll make a mess of your pillowcases too, and don't forget to moisturize. But earplugs are going to protect you from the same exact kind of fallout as well, no matter how loud your tools are. And these are not really the best ones for it. The expanding foam ones actually work a whole lot better. If you use a face shield, you're smart, but you're still going to need goggles or safety glasses. It's not either or with those. You still need eye protection behind a face shield in order to safety this job. If you have a nice car and you're not doing this work at home and you can't strip a layer, then bring a towel, blanket, or a change of clothes for that drive home. You don't want it in your car. Polishing is just the art of exploiting friction. So what we've got laid out here, we've got wheels, we've got bobs, we've got collets, we've got rouges, we've got a comb, as well as various tools capable of doing the polishing work. They all have their place, their strengths and their weaknesses, but at the most basic level, all of this stuff does exactly the same thing. That might make you question why there are so many options laid out here before us. I've got 3 different brands of the same kinds of things here, like I told you, and their prices vary. Some are bobs, some are wheels, some are loose and some are stitched. Some are solid materials and some have coatings. And all of this contributes to creating different hardnesses. All of them will wear down as you work, and that's going to cause some of these things hardnesses to actually change as you use them. The stitches can annoy you, but you can always change that with a razor knife and pull them out. Cutting stitches makes them softer. Beware of the bobs that are formed around a metal shank, like this one is. And the reason why is because everything works fine with them, Everything can be going just fine, dandy with it until it doesn't. And it only takes a medium amount of pressure to pop the tip right off and gouge the part if you're not careful. The metal things are in there right behind it. As you gain experience, you'll figure out all the ins and outs of the different tools that you use for polishing things. I picked up a rake to dress and balance wheels with. Some call it a comb. It helps with the wheels last longer and produce better results. The wheels can get caked with compound, sometimes have bits of metal embedded in them. And I've actually got an example of this, I believe. You've got one over here. This one's actually 2 wheels that were both clamped onto my bench grinder at home. That's why there's only a 5/8 inch hole in it. That's not a good polishing solution, but you can get it to work. It lacks torque to use a bench grinder. But anyway, using the rake before and after finishing your work keeps it clean and ready to go and prevents the compounds from crystallizing the wheel, making problems. You can see the aluminum particles that are embedded in this. It's got all that going on, and supposedly you could clean this up and keep using it. Well, supposedly you can. Install this with the nuts on the back side of the handle. When combing handheld tools, stand on both of the handles. And when you're dressing a big 8 or 10 inch wheel, stay well out of its way and out of its trajectory. Don't stand right in front of it and lean into it. Bad. Use your head. But back to the wheels. At the most basic level, assume that all of the yellow wheels are coarse. Chem coat wheels are cutting wheels. You use them for rough cutting or aggressive early stage polishing of hard metals. The muslin wheels are medium textured. They're durable and a thick medium for your polishing compound to stick to pretty well, and cotton or flannel wheels are soft. They're medium soft. They fuzz and they degrade quickly, taking the polishing compound away with it. I don't have any sisal wheels because they're too aggressive for everything that I need to demonstrate here, no matter how they're stitched. But for all the kinds of wheels available, a secondary delineating factor of hardness is whether they're loose or stitched. Loose is the softest. Double and triple stitched wheels are in the medium range, and spiral stitched are the hard ones. This may seem obvious to most people, but if you've never done this or heard it explained this way, you might buy a bunch of the wrong wheels for the kind of material that you're polishing. Will they still work? Yes, they'll work. Maybe not nearly as well as fast as you wish they would, but friction is still friction. Some extremely hard materials like stainless steel are going to require much harder wheels than soft metals like gold or aluminum would. Harder materials simply move the scale of what a hard and a soft wheel actually is. The harder the metal, the more friction is going to be required. On the other side of it, the softer the metal is, the more damage you may potentially do to the part by being too aggressive with your wheel selections. Just pointing out that simple basic stitching explanation of the wheel's hardness should help 99% of you who've never polished a thing before understand how to get all the right wheels for your job. The other 1% are going to use the guides that are available on most reputable polishers' websites, and the places like Eastwood, they've got graphs for materials. If you feel lost, it'll steer you back to where you need to be. If you wanted to start polishing a rough cast aluminum part without any preparation, you're going to need the hard wheel. If you've done prior surface preparation, you probably don't need a hard wheel or a chem coat wheel at all. If you've prepared the surface like I have, then a double or triple stitched wheels, that's going to be enough to be a good starting point. The reason for this is because the hard wheels are going to round off edges, and they don't reach down into the recessed areas or follow contours very well, not unless the wheel or the bob is small enough to get into those hard to reach areas. Use bobs for that, That's where these guys come in. Medium wheels work well to help remove deep scratches with one compound, and you can also yield brilliant, bright final polishing results with another compound. The soft and ultra soft cotton and flannel wheels are the best for final polishing for light scratch removal. There's always exceptions to these rules that begin once you select your polishing or cutting compounds. For instance, you can use a soft wheel with black rouge and quickly get down to the recessed and hard to reach places and contours that you can't access with a harder wheel. It won't cut as fast, but the soft wheel is the reason why it can get into those areas that do that kind of work. It's not a good combination for polishing flat and easy to reach surfaces because the soft wheels wear quickly and shed a lot of dust, but this is just an example where the wheel and compound selection is going to matter for you. That's why I said earlier that all of them do the exact same thing. You use the recipe for what works best for you and your material. You're in control of the hardness selection and the materials in your friction recipe. There's many different colors of polishing compounds available to pick from. And I've got a universal kit here, and this one came from Eastwood. It came with 6 of them, I believe. That's what it looks like now. I got 5 of them. So, yeah, that's a fairly interesting arrangement. The caps are all color coded for you. You got blue, orange. This might be black rouge. It's gray, but this is black rouge. So everything is color coded so you can quickly get to your stuff. You got brown tripoli, white diamond, black rouge, blue, orange. Plenty of manufacturers have even created their own colors, and this is fine. Each one provides a different abrasive property for generating the friction you need to do this. And just like using sandpaper to progressively increase grits and produce smoother and smoother finishes, the compounds work the exact same way. You don't have to use all of these compounds, but you don't even need them all. You just need the ones for the materials that you're working with. Typically you would do 2 to 3 passes maximum for just about anything. You just use the right ones. In addition to the kit that we've got here from Eastwood, and you see that this one here came with an assortment of bobs of different shapes for reaching different kinds of areas. And we got, you know, these big, huge, poofy things that you can work with without scratching the parts. You can see that the ends of the mandrels don't protrude through, and these are very convenient for getting to some of the tougher to reach places and doing your final finishings because they're medium to soft. That kit came with all of these rouges and also these wheels, which is a pretty good deal. If you needed to get started, that pretty much includes everything you're going to need. Now we've got the NK kit. This is just an aluminum polishing kit, specifically for aluminum and only aluminum. And I need to figure out how to destroy this box. Inside we have much the same. An assortment of polishing bobs of different shapes and textures, and the colletless ends, plus a collection of various size wheels that you can get into smaller places than some of the wheels that are included with the Eastwood kit. A collection of rouges, and here we have black rouge, white rouge, and brown tripoli. So this kit includes exactly and all the things you need to do detail work and some larger areas in one box. Very similar to the deluxe automotive polishing kit that is made for more than just aluminum. Let's see what Harbor Freight offers along the lines of a polishing kit. We pop the box open, it's the same thing. So clearly you can see that all of the manufacturers agree you need the same thing for polishing aluminum. And here again we have black rouge, brown tripoli, and white rouge again. But if you know what you need and you want to undercut everyone, then you know this 3-pack of wheels, this is from Amazon, that's like $8.99 with a 1/4-inch collet. And you also have, of course, this 1/8-inch set of bobs. It's like 50 pieces. The bobs and the wheels, all of that stuff together, 12 bucks. And your local hardware stores and hobby centers also carry these kinds of things if you need pricier ones today because you didn't plan accordingly and, yeah, need it right now. Oops, holding up progress. When it comes to larger wheels like these 8 or 10-inch units, I like to buy quality because the big tools are more dangerous than the smaller ones whenever the wheel explodes. And they do explode, not with fire or anything, but their rotating mass is far greater. And eventually you get on any polishing wheel's last stable thread and you know, they exit the arbor with great velocity. All of them are capable of doing this. The little guys are far less dangerous is all. If there is anything else that I could help you recognize for your polishing wheel shopping adventures besides their color and their hardness, it would be whether or not they're combed. These Harbor Freight wheels arrive uncombed. That means there's less likelihood that they're going to be in balance or that they're going to yield very good results until they're broken in or until you comb them into shape. You can see all these loose threads and you know, that's going to make a mess. If you go straight to polishing, it's a really messy break-in. I've got an Eastwood wheel right here, and you can see a stark variation in the, hold on, not through the bag you won't, but you can see a very stark variation in the difference of the edges on these versus the Harbor Freight wheel. And also note that breaking in a wheel or combing it makes it smaller because you wear the outer edge. So a 10-inch combed wheel is actually made from a larger diameter wheel than the 10-inch product you unwrapped. The Harbor Freight wheel is 8 inches uncombed, so it didn't get that same level of quality control, and that's the reason why one of them's $4.50 and one of them's $13. One's bigger and it's already combed and ready to go. Either wheel will still, you know, have its own sort of break-in period, but this is just something to note when you're buying them. It doesn't matter if we're talking about 6-inch or 8-inch. The Harbor Freight ones aren't combed. So you're getting a great deal, but there's going to be a little bit of work that you're front-loading onto it, so plan on making a mess while you dress them. This is one of many reasons why you need a great dust mask. Sometimes manufacturers advertise the number of layers for the polishing wheels, and the higher the number, typically the thicker the wheel because, you know, thickness. If you're wondering why one manufacturer's 10-inch 30-ply wheel costs half as much as someone else's 1060, it's simple economics. One's made from twice as much material and it's thicker. So don't be shocked by what some wheels cost. There's nothing wrong with an uncombed wheel. Felt is felt, cotton is cotton, flannel is flannel, but at least now you know what you're in for at a glance. You're quickly becoming an expert. Earlier, when I was talking about cotton and muslin, I called them medium and soft. And they both are. You know, that's where the stitching matters most, and that's why I covered it first. The hardness of either one is going to be determined only by its stitching. Cotton wheels are mostly made for color buffing, which is an in-between stage following your rough cut, and loose muslin wheels are an ideal final finishing wheel because it is porous and does a great job of holding on to your final compound. Typically, you'll find stitched cotton or flannel wheels work best prior to breaking out the white rouge, but that brings us to our next point. Interestingly enough, the Chicago die grinder version of this thing is combed. So not all Harbor Freight wheels are uncombed, just the ones for your bench grinders that come in a bag. Also, they have felt wheels available. These are just, you know, it's a dense felt. This is lamb's wool compressed, and you know, it's a hard wheel. Those are available. These are nice because they hold a great edge if you're doing detail work or you have edges to create or follow. So, and these are neat. So there's 5 different kinds of these things in the bag. We'll just dump them out here so we can get a look at it. We already talked about the Kim coat. Those are for, you know, rough polishing. We've got a loose, looks like a loose cotton wheel. And then we've got a flannel buff. And that's pretty much your metal variety there. And of course the felt ones, if you needed a harder wheel than the loose one for color polishing. It all depends on your materials, you know. But these string ones are for plastic, and it's amazing how many of these things you get in the bag for $13. You know, if you were to do this with a big name brand thing, it would probably cost you $5 to $7 a piece for those. So it's nice that you get that whole sack full of them, and like I said, you get these felt bobs. Let's take a look at all the different kits in comparison. So now we can understand the wheels a little bit better. We've covered everything on that. Look at all the stitches in this one. This is the Eastwood kit. Not only are the Eastwood wheels included in the kit bigger, but they come in a variety of stitchings. So as you can see, you get two of the large ones for the coarse polish. So you notice they're the harder ones. And then you have the single stitch one for the color buffing. And then all these loose buffs here for doing detail work. These are really best for wheels. But any large areas where you had to polish on the inside of things and not gouge anything, this would be a great tool to use for that. So that's the Eastwood kit. You notice larger buffs. Yes, it costs a little bit more. When you get the less expensive kits, they're not lower quality. 20 bucks less than the other kit. It's because the wheels are smaller, the buffs are smaller, but none of these are a bad thing. That's, like I said, it costs less, comes with 2 less polishing compounds and smaller tools. Smaller tools are a great thing. That's actually something that helps you get detail work very nicely. So the smaller the tool is, the easier it is to get into tight spaces, and you can never have too many of these things. There's advantages to every single one of these kits, no matter where they are in the food chain of polishing. So when you look at the Harbor Freight kit, just like the other two, look at this. They're all combed. All of the wheels have been combed. They're all ready to go. Put them in your power tools and get to work. It's the same sort of thing as the NK kit. You get a variety of, you get 2 single and double stitched buffs. There you go. I know that's 3, but you know, one's single stitched. And you get 3 polishing buffs and 5 bobs. Not all bobs are equal, but like I said, for different sizes and shapes, all of them are useful. That's great about the wheels, compound stitches, and combs and all, but let's talk about the spinny things. Straight off the bat, if it has an 1/8 inch shank, it's not a serious polishing tool for anything other than detail work. That's just how it is. I mean, can you polish a cylinder head with this? Why on earth would you do that to yourself? You need 2 things to polish metal: wheel speed and torque. Sometimes wheel speed is bad. Check your RPM ratings, you know, if safety's in one of those parts of your list. Otherwise, your best offense is a good defense, and you upgrade your safety gear anticipating that happening to you. So wear armor, get a helmet, whatever. Your goal is to create friction and heat, or else you're not going to really get very far quickly at all. Heat and friction are your friends. Nothing's going to do that better than torque, and there's lots of 1/4 inch options available that use electricity or air. Many of you have noticed this 1-horse polisher hanging out in the background of my other videos. I bought this 3 years ago. The stand arrived for it 2 years ago. And as you can see, this thing is a 3/4 inch shaft, 1 horsepower, high speed and low speed polisher. It's got 2 different speeds. And right down there you can see it's got the recommendations for all the safety gear I was talking about. You need to have glasses, ear protection, a dust mask, and gloves. Yes, gloves. Just in case there's those of you out there that say you can't use gloves with these types of things, you do with a polisher. This is not a bench grinder. This is a whole different kind of thing. It's a hot part. You got to hold on to it. This isn't actually going to be very useful to me with the cylinder head. And the reason why is this is best for parts that are stuff that's like this. We disassembled this. This is perfect for doing this kind of work. But standing here with the cylinder head and getting into the nooks and crannies with a big gigantic wheel like that is just not practical. It's not a very good way to do this. But we're going to use that, and we're going to use that a lot. It's not good for just those thermostat housings. It's good for intercooler end tanks, radiator end tanks, surge tanks, stuff like that. You know, some people make variable speed electric die grinders. I've never used one like that. They must be nice. I'm not complaining, and it's never prevented me from getting this job done. I find them to be by far the most powerful and efficient of all of the options. But the only drawback being is that it's not only your part that's getting hot. You have to stop and give it a rest occasionally if you care at all about its bearings. So, you know, it's definitely something you need to take into account if you want it to last. As far as I care, if this thing makes it through polishing one cylinder head, it's paid for itself. We'll always have that memory together. But if you have an endless supply of air, require even more precision speed control than that 1/8 inch Dremel provides, and all the torque and wheel speed necessary for polishing, a pneumatic die grinder is really the best option for all of this. We're going to use all three. You saw me. I bought buffs enough to go around. The problem with using air is not only are you making great progress and getting lots of work done, but now you have moved all of that effort over to an air compressor that is working the daylights out of a 240 volt circuit to keep a tank pressurized. Depending on how efficient this tool is, this can actually burn 10 times the amount of electricity as using something like this. So that's just something to think about. I'm not saying that everybody's equipment is that efficient or inefficient or anything. It's just that oftentimes the high torque solution is right there plugged into a 110 volt outlet, and you just got to give it a rest once in a while. For most of this job, we're going to actually be just using these double stitched buffs. You know, that would actually do it. Really, this is considered a triple stitch, but this is the cheap Harbor Freight one. And we'll finish up with loose wheels. Everybody's process and approach to this is going to be a little bit different, but in the case of mine, I just want to show you the efficiency of the tools and let you decide on how you're going to approach your polishing projects. So for this job, these are going to be the ones that I use the most. Probably going to go back to a flex shaft on the Dremel. There you go. I'm going to start off with the black rouge and a felt polishing bob. That's the polishing compound right there. And we're going to probably use it about at a medium speed. Let's see here. Because I'm using a flex shaft now, I like to give it a minute, let it fully warm up. Sometimes you'll hear it kind of find its groove. Put my safety glasses on. I'm not wearing the mask or any of that other stuff yet. I don't plan on making that big of a mess. I'm going to start up a timer function here. I'm going to demonstrate how long it takes to cut in a small area using this tool. We're going to drift in and out of accelerated and normal speeds for some examples, but we'll start slow here while I explain how this works. The setup and process for these little Dremel tools or the rotary tool bits, it's exactly the same as it would be for any of the bigger wheels. You still have to load them up with compound and then wear them into a round shape. They always seem to be slightly out of shape just like everything else. But you can create heat and friction without this polishing compound. It just won't be the right amount of friction to get anywhere fast. Polishing compound or rouge is simply a friction modifier, and if you got it right, then it tries to stick to the surface of the material, get cooked and stretched across the surface of the part, and it melts and drags a portion of the outer layer with it. You're cutting and stretching the surface at a molecular level here. The compound and the wheel do all of the work for you, but there are reasons sometimes for adding pressure into this mix, especially if you overdo it with the compound and get it caked. But in this case, I'm just using little brush strokes, painting my happy little trees and bushes all over it, and then going back with a little bit more pressure, buffing through it until the polishing compound I applied is completely worn off. This black emery rouge contains a fine grit that actually cuts and removes material. It's the most aggressive polishing compound that you're going to find, so you need to always keep your tool moving. Don't linger. Black rouge quickly erases all of the fine scratches from sanding, and it reveals the surface that you created. Be careful regarding all of the metal parts of these bits and tools that are spinning, because you can really damage your work fast. Fortunately, we're on the black rouge stage, which is great for removing these kinds of mistakes quickly, but you know that it's always something to stay consciously aware of. In another video, I showed you how to hide your chuck. Some of the more modern flex shafts already do this for you if you shop around. But let's shift gears again and get through this example first. You know what? I'm calling it at 5 minutes. Let's take a look at the wheel, and this is an example of the wheel breaking in as I was talking about. Notice we don't have even coverage on it. Well, it's because it's a little bit out of round and we haven't got it to make full contact across its face yet. So that's the kind of thing that you'll have to do on a larger scale with larger wheels. It's pretty bad. A few areas are a little bit shiny. You can still see the texture from my preparations prior to this video. But there are a few areas where there's detail work, rounded edges that are protruding that look fantastic. However, it's a very tiny space. There are areas where I really didn't get very good coverage at all. You can see there's an area where I couldn't even get that wheel because the wheel was too hard. This would be the tool that you would use to reach into those tighter spaces. And if you spend another 20 minutes on it with the detail buff, that's about what you got it looking like. 20 minutes. Let's stop messing around. Even a combed wheel makes a mess. We have a second test going on that I wasn't totally upfront with you about. I'm making my own personal comparison of the two cheapest 120 volt die grinders I've ever found in my entire life. I've heard mixed reviews about this die grinder that I'm using right now, and it's cheap enough for me to test it as a potential replacement for an old Milwaukee plug-in unit that I bought off of someone used in 1996 for 20 bucks and still have. I've used that old Milwaukee for well over 300 hours already. It saw some serious abuse over the years, so I'm being aggressive with this one right now. Drive it the way it's going to be driven. It either goes one of two ways. And obviously, based off of this, I got it wrong. But let's keep abusing it. My first 100 hours with my Milwaukee were total abuse because I was young and stupid. But it's mostly because I got it for only 20 bucks.
Sorry, smoking.
You're not really supposed to use pressure at all when you polish things. Wheel speed and your friction recipe are really all it takes. But because I'm using black rouge, which is a cutting compound, and I'm not on my finishing pass, I have the flexibility to show you what happens when you do this wrong. It's not all bad. It's just usually bad. Cast aluminum parts like this are less affected by heat than other materials would be. But pressure adds heat, and heat can change the structural integrity of the material you're polishing. For me, on a cutting pass, this is a good thing. So is this torture test. This is also the same thing that I did on my first example, so I'm doing it again.
And there you have it. In a fraction of the time, I'm still wearing my headgear. But anyway, if you can understand me, in a fraction of the time we created 10 times better results using the right tool that has torque. That's my first time using this thing. It got really hot. It was smoking. Didn't like the pressure being applied to it. Seemed to complain a little bit. So you make up for it with wheel speed and just lightly let it do its work, and I think it'll be fine. So, not as tough as the Milwaukee I originally used, but you can see the difference in the results when you use the right tool. 1/4 inch is serious. 1/8 inch, that's just way too big of an area to need it. You actually need that on the finer detail where that doesn't fit. Pretty simple. You just apply compound to the wheel. Apply the wheel to the part.
The 1/4 inch tools are more powerful and can support a larger wheel that makes a bigger contact patch. The trade-off is how their larger radius makes it harder to reach into the tight spaces. You need to attack this from multiple angles so that you can get into all the recessed areas of your work. The ones you can't reach will quickly reveal themselves.
I'm covered. And so there you have it. In like a short minute, I wound up putting a shine in that thing. Everything's flat and smooth. Still needs some more work. It's not perfect, but there you go. Different amount of time and effort, and that's why you don't use 1/8 inch tools. You use 1/4 inch stuff for this. It's why you don't use this. That's from the minute or two, all swept up now from all over the shop floor, just from that. That stuff gets everywhere.
To combat this, do this kind of work somewhere where you can make a mess without contaminating all of your other precision machined engine parts.
You might notice my workbench now has wheels. And that's pretty cool because now I can roll my entire mess outside. But I brought it back inside because I need the light. You can see there's green tape all over it. I put polyester tape on it just to protect flange surfaces that I don't want to polish because I'm going to be moving pretty quick here. I'm going to go ahead and do all the black rouge on this side, and we'll see how long that takes. I've got a clock set up. There you go.
On this complex of the surface, you're going to find harder wheels don't reach everywhere you need to work. And if you don't apply a little bit of pressure, your wheel stays hard. You could use a softer wheel, but the harder ones are recommended for the early stages, and the softer ones wear much faster and make a much bigger mess. I want to use a bigger wheel because they don't leave tracks like the bobs and the buffs usually do. So early in the cut, I use pressure to break up the hard wheel's structure and soften it. I gave the die grinder several cool down periods where I cycled it to keep the fan moving to help cool it off, but its smoky overheating condition never improved for me. I'm not sure this is the best unit to demonstrate my experience with their product, but this is one of the most physically taxing things you could ever do with this kind of tool. Kind of jumping right in. It runs hotter than every single other power tool I've used though, and it runs hot whether or not I apply any pressure at all. In my hands it feels like it's losing torque because it's having a harder time maintaining its wheel speed. It's starting to sound terrible, but I'm still getting good results with my part with it. But really, I'm not using it any differently than I did with the Milwaukee on a cutting pass. The results show up really fast at this stage, but it can be deceiving. This is where that question, how shiny is shiny, comes into play. Just because you cut the surface with black rouge and it shines, it doesn't mean that it's ready for the next compound. Black rouge will put a shine on surfaces that are covered in fine scratches or tiny pores in the metal, and that's the kind of surface that will trap the non-abrasive polishing compounds in future stages, because it isn't ready yet. You have to not look past the surface and off into the reflection to see this. Focus on the surface. Standing over the part, you'll see whether it's dull or hazy, something that you can't experience very well with a monocular perspective that's already doing all that focusing for us. It takes 2 eyes, and I'm not producing this in 8K 360 VR. Sorry, 4K is all you get. It endured far less than I expected, and I don't feel bad about doing this to it.
Done.
Harbor Freight sells a different unit today, but no matter whose electric tools you're using, big sticky wheels make grinder go boom, and that's the real reason you don't want to use pressure.
It made it 25 minutes total. Better save the wheel.
Longevity will hinge upon their power output and shaft bearing quality.
It's fun while it lasted. Didn't last anywhere near long enough. Since we've hit a temporary stopping point, I might as well share with you one of the many things that I like about Never Dull. These little pieces of wadding are great at taking off excess compound. If you just wipe it around, it just
all floats and lifts right off. You don't have to work. There's no elbow grease involved. There is when it comes to applying rouge and removing it, but if you're just wiping up excess, Neverdell does it really quick. And there you have it. Does a really good job. And that's how far one die grinder makes it. This time the wheel outlived the die grinder. But I have a solution for that. Two solutions actually, but the first one being, we're going to switch to air tools. Air tools have their own built-in cooling function. It's called air. And next, one of these layers of threads is coming out. I'm pulling threads to soften the wheel. Pulling the threads out of the wheel just increased its surface contact area, which also increases its drag, but it also increases its ability to reach into tighter spaces. Black rouge with a softer wheel and a little bit of pressure is my recipe for creating those liquid corners. Even with a big 4-inch wheel and the torque that an air tool provides, it's not going to carry the same kind of wheel speed as the electric tools can. Your technique needs to accommodate maintaining your wheel speed, but at least the tools won't burst into flames in your hands if you're mashing on them too hard. Not going to happen here. Because we pulled threads, we're breaking in a brand new section of the wheel and making a big mess all over again. It happens. It'll appear while I'm working that I'm bouncing the tool. I'm not. That's just the acceleration. I'm just backing off to let the wheel regain its momentum before touching down again, treating each cycle like a brush stroke, pushing my work along, and as you deplete your air compressor tank, your work is going to become less efficient. You can create condensation problems and your tools are going to get very cold. Gloves needed for a completely different reason. But all this is because few die grinders have any efficiency at all. They're very high consumption tools that put a big load on your air supply. Big reserve tanks and oiled high volume compressors with fast recovery rates are your friends here if you want to get this kind of work done using air tools. Sorry, your pancake compressor just isn't going to cut it. 40-gallon minimum here. Finally. It's actually a half hour later, and I'll explain the delayed start in a minute. The air die grinder's definitely slower than the electric one where making progress is concerned, but it's a whole lot cooler, easier, and less explodey. Flipping it around to take advantage of the wheel direction is less complicated because of its size. You really need to attack each area with black rouge in all 4 directions for best results at the very least. I prefer starting with the big wheels rather than the detail gear because you can surprise yourself by how much less detail work you wind up having to do with smaller, slower tools. This combination of black rouge with a modified wheel does better than some of the smaller wheels for the rough buff because of its footprint and wheel speed, but mostly because it penetrates into the corners and detail work faster than everything else I've tried. Give your compressor equal run time and rest time when you're doing this. You want to make sure that the motor spends as much time off as it does on. Oil your tools every hour. I told you I was going to explain it. Can you tell how excited I am right now? Does the fun ever start? The compressor ran for nearly a half hour, so what I meant was I waited a half hour before I started back up again. When I said finally, before I said that I was just waiting to wait. This is one area where 2 completely different kinds of tools share the exact same runtime issue. Either a hot electric die grinder or a cold sweaty air die grinder require some time to rest. We're only about 2 hours deep since polishing began, but almost half of that's been waiting. I had intended to rotate between the two, but my plans got foiled, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling. Anyway, now it's the next night, and I've got my old Milwaukee up here with me this time. Now I can rotate between air and electric tools again, just like I was trying to do last night, to make a better use of my time. I've sworn multiple times that this thing was dead, but here it is. I can't believe it. This is the Lazarus of die grinders, and it's the $20 progenitor of the entire King of Bling car right here. OG. Perhaps there's just no replacement for it after all. But anyway, the deeply inset casting areas around the exhaust flange is a challenge to polish with just about every wheel. There are areas where it doesn't hurt anything to do the detail work first because the wheel doesn't fit in there anyway, but every area that you should polish with detail tools, you should really do your best to go back over again with the biggest wheel that you can fit afterwards. The detail tools leave tracks, so blend those in and erase them. Hopefully most of this side is going to be done tonight, but I don't really want to get my hopes up here. There's still lots of hazy spots, scratches, incomplete surfaces, and tracks to erase, but you're going to notice them more if you're the one standing here doing this. I managed to cycle out that whole compressor 4 different times this evening and get through most of the detail work. We're at 4.5 hours now, but I did save a good recessed spot to show you up close where the wheel doesn't reach. Here you can see an area where we did the Dremel test, and it's still a little bit problematic. That's actually not where I was focusing my efforts though. I'm less done with this side than I wish I was, but it won't be long now. That's the problem with setting expectations. Doing the job right matters more than your expectations. There's still haze and scratches in some of the corners, and how shiny is indeed subjective. But here's that detail spot I was talking about. The dull gray aluminum blends into the shine very nicely. But you don't want any of that dull gray aluminum left behind after this pass at all, because it's going to stay that way if you do. Sure, the other compounds are going to cut it down a little bit more, but the better finish you lay down right now, the more time you'll save on the next ones. The hard to reach places are never an exception to this. As I blend using this 4-inch wheel, notice the funk line from the edge of the wheel against where it polishes and how it leaves residue. That's showing how much penetration that wheel will give you. There's still plenty of haze around the exhaust ports, and I still have more hard to reach areas and details to do. Sadly, I never got around to fully erasing our Dremel test from earlier, but you get the idea for what this process looks like now. Why all those completely different things we had spread out on the table do the exact same thing. Plus, this is just another fancy way of sanding aluminum anyway, except instead of sandpaper, the abrasive uses a fabric substrate and a waxy compound. I always start polishing aluminum using black rouge because it saves you from sanding into the thousands of grits. I like the smooth black rouge effect. I do all 3 compounds. You can get away with using only 2 to final finish and still win that trophy, but if you do all 3 and you take your time, you'll spend less time and effort maintaining it. The previous night we quit this project at 4.5 hours, so we're picking back up where we left off. Tonight's goal is detail cutting. Using the biggest bob to dig out all the details will only get you so far though. The bobs have a big radius. The 1/4-inch tools are for getting lots of work done fast, but they won't handle all the eccentricities of this particular cylinder head. They can't reach into the tightest spaces or the edges, but wherever they can reach, they're going to produce the best quality finish the fastest. Earlier I showed you a large flat area where I spent 20 minutes with an 1/8-inch rotary tool to produce a finish that required being completely refinished by another tool because it looked terrible. And that's because it's not the right tool for doing that kind of work. But there's one thing that 1/8-inch tools can do that the 1/4-inch tools just can't. And you already know where this is going. You can keep chasing these details with 1/4-inch tools with black rouge until you distort the part if you're not careful. I've got this finish near where I want it to be, and I'm just following the haze line around that detail where the 1/4-inch tools couldn't reach until it's as smooth and shiny as all the other stuff around it. You only define edges and do detail work with the Dremel. Just the stuff that 1/4-inch tools can't reach. Your 1/8-inch tool won't do its work without leaving tracks. Tracks that you can easily see. Tracks that you'll need to remove with something bigger, but the 1/8-inch rotary tools will reach all the places that your big, efficient workhorse tools just can't reach. Since we've done the bulk of that work already, it's really easy to see where all of these detail areas are. You'll simply try to blend those edges and corners with this tool and put a finish where you couldn't. That's going to make the best use of your time and effort with all the different kinds of tools we've demonstrated so far, and this is the reason for all of this variety that I've got. I'm not going to use every single one of the things that I had on that bench. I'm just going to use all the things that I need. If you start small, you'll find out where you need to go bigger. Start big, and it's going to show you where you need to go smaller. The latter is always the most efficient way of approaching polishing, even though it comes with having to blend your tracks at the end again with the larger wheels. Black emery rouge cuts every bit as fast as having emery in its name implies, and the felt bobs on either side's die grinder are hard, fast-cutting bobs. My hack to cut a row of threads out of a hard wheel and make it mostly soft, and then using a coarse cutting compound that you'd expect to use with a harder wheel, allowed me to produce a flat, brilliant polished finish deep into the recessed areas that a hard wheel would not let me reach. It's slower to do it this way, and it requires you to do some forbidden things like add pressure, but besides defining the corners, There really isn't a whole lot of cleanup left for me to do. Varying my attack angle to take advantage of the wheel direction let me get most everywhere that I needed to reach. Over 7.5 hours in, this probably feels like the most progress anyone's witnessed on this project so far, but it wouldn't look anything like this at all without all of that other prior work that went into it. This thing is already making straight reflections of objects that are over 30 feet away, and you can see the liquid corner thing that I'm talking about, how consistent the radiuses are on all of the intersections in the casting. I didn't take away all of its character. I feel like all I've done is just create more. So how shiny is shiny? Yeah, this is nowhere near shiny enough. Black rouge leaves scratches in the finish because it's abrasive. Much easier to see with two eyes in a moving perspective, but it's still visible for those of you without all that, for now. At least it's in focus, hey. Regrettably, I'm still not done with this side yet. There's more I still need to do to it. There's 4 areas nobody's ever going to see that aren't finished, and several other places I feel I can improve. But I'm quitting for today. This is still just the first side. And here we are the next evening. I've decided I don't feel like breaking that polishing bob in yet, because there's still plenty left on the one that's already in the chuck. So I figured I'd just go ahead and move on to the next side and get that out of the way. I'll do all the detail work on every single side last, before the final buff. I'll break that bob in then. Now that my wheel is well worn in, it's making short work of the detail areas. I'm actually doing better with this one than I expected I would. There's a few angles that I didn't get even coverage that cleaned up really fast with the 1/4 inch bob. After a quick blend and a cleanup, this side looks really promising, moving right along with the same techniques and tools already in place. This side's so loaded with detail work that I know I'll need to do most of it with the 1/8 inch tool, so I'm rolling it back over to where that works best. There's so many angles, recessed, complicated shapes, and lines to follow that the wheel can't do everything here. In every way imaginable, using the Dremel with a fine polishing bob is way better than rolling up sandpaper and digging all this out by hand. It's still tricky in places, but all that other suffering makes this a whole lot easier right now. You witness a transformation of all the surfaces once you can get your edges right. Of course, once you're done with all of that, you've got to hit the whole thing all over again with the big wheel and blend all of your handiwork so that it doesn't look scribbled on and stupid. And then one last cleanup with a never dull before moving on to the next side. Let's give it an inspection. It's alright, on par with the other unfinished side. I know you want to see me do the lettering. Need to spend a little bit more time on the recesses, and one side's going to get sharper as we roll that finish around to the intake side. At 11 hours, we're moving about as fast as we were because this side was half as long and it's covered in speed bumps. All that compressor resting and 1/8 inch rotary work barely broke our pace. I'll come back to the recesses. Let's do the intake side. There's been so much shiny stuff up to this point that I'm slowing down here to show you again where we're coming from. This is the 800 grit hand sanded and prepared surface that I've created over the past year since I first got my hands on this cylinder head. For those of you who are new here, there's a whole series of videos about surface preparation and why I'm doing it this way, but this is the last time we'll ever see any of that work except for in the final results. All of that effort, smoothing and blending, is saving hours of wear and tear on my tools right now, but the wear and tear is really starting to show up on that 4-inch Chicago wheel from Harbor Freight. It's more like a 1 3/4 inch wheel now. Remember, I said smaller wheels are a great thing. What they lack in wheel speed, they make up for in penetration. You can get lots of detail work finished fast with a small, soft wheel, but they don't last, sadly. Eventually, even the old 1/4 inch bobs lose their edge and don't let you get everywhere that you wish you could with them. If you need the shape and you don't have it, you can do damage to your finish by chasing it, at least on the Black Rouge stage, so go ahead and change out your tool. I think we're done with the 1/4 inch cone for now. In my case, I opted to go 1/8 inch with the cone for the control and accuracy on this side. It's a whole lot cheaper, and the new edge helps me knock down all the exposed detail far better than I could with the worn 1/4 inch bob. It's okay if they leave tracks whenever you can shape that track to your advantage. So, for corners and radius edges like the valve cover flange, the cone bobs are just hard to beat. As always, you have to blend it. Now I'm using the cylinder-shaped 1/8" bob, going medium size at first because I know it's going to wear down. The intake side has some deeply recessed areas above the intake ports that are easily in reach with this tool. This just took all the work out of putting a shine in places where even your fingertips won't fit. Of course, there's a whole lot of this on this side. You know, each one of these recessed areas has 4 sides and some detail work to cover, and it runs the whole length of the cylinder head. So none of your 1/4" tools are going to do anything with this at all. This is the most serious, unserious polishing tool you will ever buy. These cylinder bobs are the ones I wanted to break in last, and it's because the way they wear will let you get all the way through all of your detail that remains on this whole cylinder head with only 2 of them. Flat recesses, flange edges, and corners, you name it. For the cutting pass, they're my favorite final choice. Aside from blowing up the die grinder, we only consumed a 4" wheel, a 1/4" cone bob, 2 1/8" cone bobs, and 2 1/8" cylinder-shaped bobs. We started up a single-stitch 2" Harbor Freight wheel right in the middle of the intake side and then used it for the remainder of all this 1/8" grinder's detail blending and this final pass here. Still have plenty of that one left. But still, that's only like 5% of the supplies that were on the table. Let the size of the part, the size of the detail, and the hardness of the material that you're working with determine which tools you need to use. Go big, and if it's detailed, go softer on the wheel. Go small only where big doesn't work. Blend, blend, blend. Any hazy, porous surfaces will be a magnet for trapping the brown tripoli in the next stage. But don't worry, with plenty of effort and time, it will still come out perfect if you should choose to be lazy right now. If you're going for show quality results, then you have to do the same thing everywhere. The polyester tape, 10 out of 10. Only a high heat resistant poly tape would have stood up to this kind of work, and it did. It's my first time polishing with it, and it just made my cleanup a whole lot less complicated. You can't avoid getting dust and compound everywhere while doing this, but minimizing this process's worst effect of clumpy caked on buildup inside of hard to reach places is wise. You notice I put the oil galley plugs back in when I started working on the lettered side, but these results look pretty good to me. Yeah, they're alright. You want the letters. On the G6K head, I learned that trying to detail these letters at every stage of sanding and polishing distorted the living daylights out of them. I tried to remove every single last pip from that other head, and the abrasion from the sides of my sandpaper wound up rounding off all the edges around the letters. It literally changed the font, still completely readable, but noticeably distorted afterwards, and it's bugged me forever because it's mine, and I did it. It's something that I can't put back. I'm the one who sees it every single time it has to be repolished. If I wanted to get all the way through that rough cast and all the pits and polish this one completely smooth, well then say goodbye to the top left corner of the G and the bottom right corner of the S. There's no right answer for this. You still won't get all the pits out from between the letters even if you try hard enough to change the font. It's extra porous here. So all I'm going to do is just put what little stank I can on it with this tiny wheel and some black rouge, clean it up some more, blend it, and then decide how to clean up every single other little recessed area that I know I left all over this head. Stuff that was tough to reach or just a little bit hazy. You know, some areas the polishing bobs just aren't the right tool. This is nice because it's a fine buff that you can also blend while you polish. But really, all I want to do this time is preserve the letters the way they are. I could have spent an extra couple of hours on all 7 steps of preparation to make each and every letter chiseled and perfect.
That's all I'm doing.
And then still blown right through it with the polishing wheel at this stage, just like I did the last time. So this is my compromise. OE letters that endure the exact same polishing process as everything else got, but show their original shape instead. I'll be equally as dissatisfied with this solution over the years, so why go through all the extra effort of screwing up a second set of letters in front of everyone on YouTube? I don't have the tool for this, and if you do, you're a jeweler, not a mechanic. Heck, I'm just the IT guy with enough patience to document all this in my spare time. Everything that you see here would not exist without all the support I've received on Patreon and from all of the people doing all the things that Google wants you to do to my videos on YouTube. Even if I don't deserve algorithms, they still want you to do it all. Developing the skill can be a glorious blessing or a terrible disease. You'll discover how to be your own worst critic by taking on a job like this, and that's terrific practice for your creative process. Our greatest accomplishments are always rife with difficulty. So try not to walk on the dark side with these newfound skills just because I gave them to you for free. Never lose sight of the fact that it's a 0 horsepower mod, and in the end,
We're done with that.
all you have that's glittering is just plain old cast aluminum. Don't get too attached to it. remember that all this work is expendable and that it's just a single feature of the parts that make up your dream. It's pretty freaking cool though. And if any of you are disappointed that you didn't get to see this one run, stay tuned.